You're watching Notepad. I'm your host, Ibrahim Sani. COVID-19 has impacted various industries. People keep on talking about the tourism industry, hospitality, and many others. But one industry that keeps on reappearing on people's psyche in terms of this period is, of course, the sharing economy. One company within this economy is, of course, SOCAR. You've probably seen them, seen the car at least, in and around your neighborhoods. Joining me is Leon Foong of SOCAR, here to talk about the impact of his company and how it plans to move forward during this pandemic. Leon, thanks again for taking the time to speak with us. Let's talk a little bit about how COVID-19 has impacted SOCAR.
So I think with all businesses, we've seen pretty unprecedented impact on the mobility space. And when I talk about unprecedented, what we saw was, during the MCO movement control order, we actually saw a huge reduction in terms of demand for mobility solutions. When people cannot go out, when people are encouraged to stay at home, obviously, the need for mobility or transport solutions will go down accordingly. However, since then, we've actually managed to revisit our core business to truly understand how can we be better prepared for such scenarios. So since the start of the MCO in March, we've actually launched new business verticals, such as SOCAR for business mobility, where we provide mobility solutions for transport and logistic aggregators, as well as SMEs who need transportation solutions to send their goods to customers, number one. And number two, we also understood the need to support the communities by offering special packages to the frontliners. So these were two key parts of the business that obviously performed pretty well during the MCO. And since then, as we enter into the recovery MCO phase, we've actually seen very healthy recovery in our core business, as we see that people prefer having an option to drive themselves rather than potentially use solutions like public transportation or enter into a car with another individual. So when you drive yourself, there's still the ability for yourself to control your immediate environment. So that's something that we saw a very healthy uptake in. And as the government is encouraging people to start getting back to business, as more and more people embrace the Cuti Malaysia philosophy, we also see TREVO, which is our subsidiary, seeing a huge uptake in demand as people look for shared vehicles for them to drive to their local domestic destination of choice.
How is TREVO different from SOCAR?
So when we first launched, we had a very simple mission, which is to empower Malaysians with the option to go carless. And our mission still stays very much the same. So when we first launched, we actually invested in cars. We bought vehicles, and we still are, and actually placed them in very strategic locations so that it's easy and convenient for all customers or members to rent out these vehicles. TREVO, on the other hand, actually taps into the idea of generating additional income for Malaysians. We understand the fact that more than 90% of households in Malaysia own at least one vehicle. Right? More than 40% own two vehicles or more. What this means is we see a lot of underutilized cars which sit at home in a garage or in a car park, not really generating any income or any productivity for anyone. So what we've decided to do is leverage the amount of demand that we built up through SOCAR and actually open up the platform by allowing people to share their cars, to host their cars, in return for additional cash.
The weird thing about this is that COVID-19 is impacting mostly urban centers. Your business is focused mainly on urban centers because that's where the cars are and that's where the people is. Let's talk a little bit about how you are trying to manage on growing your business, also providing people opportunity to earn a living, but at the same time dealing with this risk day to day. It's no joke in terms of this resurgence coming back. One view is that it's imminent, the next wave. How do you balance that kind of social responsibility of making people safe, but at the same time growing your business, all within the ambit of COVID-19?
We're very much aligned with the public, kind of philosophy towards tackling this issue, right? While obviously ensuring that everyone sticks to the SOPs. Right, people should not be afraid to go out there and support local businesses. Right, fear is the ultimate danger that can help destroy businesses and destroy livelihoods. So we need to really categorize between fear and rationality. So let me give you an example. Right, if someone was totally consumed by fear, they'll tell themselves, let's not go out, let's just stay at home. But the rational option would be like, Okay, let's not maybe go to overly crowded places, but at the same time, you still need to eat. You still need to have meetings. Right? During this process, why not try and support the local ecosystem by following SOPs? Wear your mask, sanitize your hands, right? Make sure that every time you go in, you actually bother taking out your app, scanning the MySejahtera app to actually check in. Right? These are the kind of common steps that everyone can do. It doesn't cost you much, and people should do. So for us, we really focus on telling people, look, try and carry on your lives as normal. However, if you would like to take extra precautions, such as you want to avoid public congested places, or you want to avoid busy transit stations, why not use shared cars as an option? So as part of that, we've actually encouraged people to use our SOCAR to you delivery service, which allows for contactless delivery of SOCAR vehicles straight to the individual. So instead of you going to a busy mall to potentially pick up your car, what we can say is, look, if you really need to still do your groceries or run some errands or travel to a few places, we can actually send the car right to your doorstep without you having to meet another individual. And these cars come sanitized with also a sanitization kit in the car, so you can wipe out the commonly touched surfaces.
Let's talk a little bit about the macroeconomy that is going to impact the country. We've seen second quarter numbers actually down 17%, one of the lowest in the world, if not in the region. We've also seen how employment is creeping up month on month. The recent numbers that we have here is 5.9% in June. I don't know whether these numbers are certified, but 5.3% in May. We know that this is a trend. People know another person that has lost a job. Just recently, as recent as yesterday, my interviewee lost her job, but she has since then pivoted into another business. But that kind of reality is now sinking in. Do you feel that introductions such as TREVO, for instance, would actually help in your small way to address that macroeconomic concerns that is impacting the country?
So I think we're just starting to see the early signs of the full economic impacts of the pandemic. So I think what you said is true, where due to obviously the early pandemic and the MCO, right, we've seen a huge domino effect on businesses now, and that trickles down to the employment. Right? However, I mean, we look at also macro data such as car sales trends. So for example, for the first half of this year, I think in terms of total industry volume, only 170,000 new cars were sold. 190,000 compared to last year, which was closer to about 270,000. Right? So that figure obviously suggests a delta in terms of the first 6 months. However, June figures year on year was actually higher than June in 2019. So obviously what the government is doing in terms of reduction of SST, the full 10% for locally assembled cars or the 50% of SST for CBU cars has had an uplift on the purchase of motor vehicles. What we're seeing though is people still fundamentally need a car to get around. In fact, during these times, they prefer having a car which they can drive themselves so that they can control the environment they're in. However, how do you make that car more affordable? So obviously, for the past few months, there's been the loan moratorium, which is coming to an end towards the end of September. When speaking to some banks, we've seen more than 90% of retail customers actually taking up the moratorium. So more than 90% of retail customers have enjoyed not having to pay the installments for the past few months. However, in September, when it comes to an end, what we're saying is, look, we don't want people to make any drastic or financial decisions, such as having to immediately sell off your car or having to default on your loan. So why not leverage TREVO as a platform to really make it easier for you to supplement paying off the monthly installments? Or should you choose to decide to keep that car, or should you decide to take on a new loan just to buy a car to enjoy the SST benefits? TREVO is always an option to help share your financial burden.
Okay. We'll take a short break before continuing our conversation with Leon Foong of SOCAR. Don't go anywhere. Thanks for staying on with us. I am with Leon of SOCAR. Let's talk a little bit about the element of that geek that you have. The last time you were here, you were talking about how you're geeking out in terms of the science of people moving, the macro data that you get, the perhaps automation that you want to install in terms of how you view your cars and how people move. That must be already an interesting thing to do, but now it's even more interesting because now you can actually see the before after movement of people, COVID, pre-COVID, MCO, recovery MCO, and many others, right? How has people changed in terms of the behavior of their movement, literal movement, during this pandemic, and what learnings did you take from it? Is it because of these kind of things that you've learned that you've launched TREVO and all the other things or iterations or pivoting of your business, or it's more of commercial sense? Which one comes first, consumer behavior or commercial decisions?
So interesting fact was that during the MCO period, we took a huge hit to the business in terms of demand, as mentioned earlier. However, people still needed to travel out for essential services, and we wanted to find out where people were actually deemed as essential. So when we looked at the data, people were actually going to places that provide healthcare, hypermarkets, banks, obviously to do your daily banking or withdraw cash. But the fourth location that we realized was quite interesting was actually fast food joints. So a lot of people, I guess, when they couldn't get groceries, the next other option, if they wanted to feed a family, was to go out, dash to the fast food joint, pick up some takeaway, and go home. So that was actually during the MCO. However, now as we move towards the RMCO period, what we realize is booking durations are obviously getting back longer and longer. People tend to drive shorter distances, but they prefer keeping the car at home, just as a backup, just in case they need to run to places, just in case they have a family member that does not want to take public transport. So they're actually booking cars instead of previously for shorter periods of time. We're seeing more bookings that are above 24 hours. And that lends in nicely into our new business model as well, which is TREVO, where we support a person-to-person marketplace for car sharing, and the minimum rental duration or the minimum sharing duration on TREVO is actually 24 hours. And what we're seeing is the most popular category within P2P car sharing, at least on our platform, is actually hatchback economy cars.
Okay.
Right.
Is it because it's cheap?
I think people just still want a backup option to travel to places, to go around, and sometimes they want a smaller car that's probably more fuel efficient, easier to park, easier to maneuver, to just get to places. So there's still a fundamental need, especially in a city like Kuala Lumpur and Selangor, for people to drive because of the way the cities are built. Right? So what this means is car sharing we see playing a huge role in the mobility ecosystem moving forward, not just in terms of helping people get around, but number two as well is also to support local businesses. So now that we've seen people rent like I said, a Myvi for a few days, when we dive deeper, is we see actually a lot of local small businesses also renting these cars to support their logistic needs, right? Whether it's to go pick up inventory, to run their own deliveries for small cake shops. Sometimes it's actually cheaper if you have a huge, decent amount of volume of deliveries to actually have your own delivery logistic solutions.
Let's look at SOCAR Business Mobility Plan. The idea here, as per declared by you guys, is to support SMEs and home businesses. Let's learn more about this.
Sure. So we've actually had multiple partnerships as part of SOCAR Business Mobility. So we partnered with the likes of, as I mentioned, logistic aggregators, such as Teleport, the likes of Lalamove, Pickup, where we realized that in the gig economy, right, a lot more people nowadays want additional income. I think a recent survey said, 4 in 10 Malaysians were actually considering participated in the sharing economy just to generate some supplementary cash. However, not everyone who wants to participate in the gig economy actually has access to the right tools. So, for example, if I wanted to do motorbike deliveries, maybe I have a motorbike. However, when it's raining, when it comes to bulky items that require a bit more care, the SMEs that we're working with might not actually want a motorbike delivery solution. So when it comes to that, I can actually offer our cars, match them to anyone out there who wants to access these income opportunities, and allow them to start making money immediately without having to invest in their own vehicles.
So they sign up, there's no cash up front, there's no capital outlay?
No, all they need is just sign up on SOCAR, right? Express that they want to be part of the SOCAR for Business Mobility program. They will get a special tag in their account, which allows them to enjoy a special promotion on our hourly prices.
Has that really, do you have case studies where you can actually see them being,
Yeah, so I think
economically-
one of our very successful partnerships was with one of the logistic partners, where they wanted not just vehicles, but they also wanted access to our database of drivers. So we actually curated a unique database of drivers and vehicles for them. And these drivers or delivery agents, on average, do 20 over jobs a day on the platform, right? And that equates to about 300 ringgit and over worth of delivery earnings, which is a very healthy income. And out of that 300 ringgit, the car, right, including petrol, only comes up to about 60 ringgit.
Okay. What about privacy concerns when you're sharing databases across companies?
Oh, so everything comes with permission from the end user. So when we do a partnership, obviously we'll send a blast out to our own internal database to opt in for the special program. And what we realized was during the MCO, we at SOCAR, we actually have one of the largest databases of people with driver's license. So what this means is these people can also become a supply for different gig economy platforms. So when we tap into our existing customer base, the amount of interest was actually very encouraging, right? And obviously we saw that a lot of them during the MCO were obviously in search of additional income. The demand obviously since MCO has come down a little bit for these new job opportunities. But what we're seeing is a great counter-cyclical play when it comes to managing our demand.
Okay. Also, I want to talk about the impact of the moratorium on the loan, the car loans. Banks don't know yet how the NPL status is for their loan book. This is because the moratorium has not yet passed, but when it does, the people that were supposed to pay will be compared against the people that were supposed to pay but didn't, and that hence you will get some sort of percentage where the banks are actually quite dreading right now. We've had a lot of bank CEOs seated where you are seated, talking about they don't know how it's like until the announcement of the moratorium is over. Based on that, how do you think that will change your business model in terms of whether or not you want to intensify the kind of offerings you do for the market versus trying to do what you guys are doing now and business as usual until and unless more information comes through?
Oh, I think it reinforces our conviction in the shared mobility marketplace. So what this means is, in fact, with the moratorium coming to an end, we've actually approached multiple banks to initiate discussions on how can we support them to actually ease the blow on someone having not paid off their installments for the past 3 months to suddenly having to get used to making that monthly outflow again. Right? And one great way to really ease that financial impact of having to start repaying your monthly installments is actually through TREVO. So a lot of banks that we've spoken to have actually already expressed interest. We're also fortunate enough that TREVO, despite being a peer-to-peer marketplace, is actually one of the few endorsed car-sharing platforms that have got official approval by the MOT to run a pilot project. So what this means is, through the comfort of obviously seeing that even the Ministry of Transport has offered us a official permission to execute a pilot project, right? By working with the banks, they get additional comfort that, hey, look, this is a legitimate platform that eventually can be scaled, right, beyond that 1-year pilot to become a long-term solution to really make it easier for Malaysians to pay off their car loans. Right? So for me, SOCAR is really about mobility. It's about choices. It's about giving you that freedom to choose the car you want. But TREVO, yes, it's about fun, but for me, TREVO is really about driving your dreams. Not just in terms of your holiday dreams and where you want to go to for adventures, but also driving your financial dreams. A lot of people don't realize that, at the end of the day, you pay, say, 3% interest every year. Over 5 to 7 years, you're paying 21% interest. You're paying 20% more than the car than you should be over 7 years. Who's going to come up with that 20%? Often the consumer, the individual. But now, what we're telling them is by sharing your car, you're essentially sharing the additional 20% interest premium that you're paying on a 7-year loan with other people as well.
Using some numbers that you mentioned just now, about 40% of people in Malaysia are actively looking for supplementary income.
Yep.
What kind of numbers can you share with us, the public, in terms of the cars that are currently idle and unutilized? Is the discrepancy a lot more?
So I think based on our market data, we see that on average, a car in Malaysia is only utilized about 92%. Sorry, not utilized for 92% of the time. Right? So what this
Right.
means is over 168-hour period, right? 8% of the time is being driven on the road, right? 92% of the time, the car is sitting around, for example, in a car park or at home,
Yeah.
right? And we have another interesting data, which is on cars that are listed on the TREVO platform, right? On average, on TREVO per month, we get 4 bookings requests for each car on a monthly basis. And what this means is each car, each booking request on average is 3 days. So what this means is you list your car on TREVO, right? We see on average each car getting booked out 12 days a month,
Okay.
right? In terms of booking requests. So what this means is by just say if I list my Myvi on the platform for say 60 ringgit a day, right? And assuming that we round down the 12 to 10 day figure, on that alone, I can really recoup 600 ringgit in terms of my monthly installment.
Yeah.
Obviously, 600 ringgit is shared between the TREVO platform and the host, right? But assuming that normally we take 25% and the host takes 75%, so 3/4 of that actually goes back to the consumer.
So
And
it's
a lot of that
450 ringgit, for instance, in
Yes.
that 600 math.
yeah.
Okay. So the economic argument is there.
And we've already seen this proven on the platform across thousands of cars.
Okay.
Yes.
Now the question is that human behavior change that you want to ask people to, go ahead, have your sleep, nap, whatever, or go ahead and work, come in at 9 o'clock in the morning, leave at 5. In between, we'll take your car. How comfortable are people with that idea?
So I think you're right. I think the trust gap is always something that is a challenge initially, especially when we're still a new brand. So being a new brand, we're working very hard to overcome the trust gap. As part of that, we actually have an insurance policy in place called TREVO Shield, where if you don't want to rely on your own insurance, TREVO will actually pay for a top-up insurance on your behalf. Obviously, we charge you a higher commission fee on top of that. But in return, every single car while on the TREVO platform is insured up to a maximum liability of 3 million ringgit.
Okay. Now, sometimes it's more than insurance. Actually, it's the virus that we talk about.
Okay.
So, is that a greater concern for consumers?
What we're seeing here is there are 2 types of concerns. One is the financial impact. One is what I call the inconvenience impact.
Now, I'm talking about the irrational argument. Like if you tell your consumers, if you tell people on your platform, don't worry, we sanitize everything. Is there an irrational fear that comes in?
Oh, there always is. That's why we actually invested in an extra step. So on TREVO, we actually have a separate layer called custodians, so that we actually allow hosts to not have to do a face-to-face handoff. And that's the beauty of it. So let's just say I have a car, I want to share it. I list it on TREVO, I have all the documents approved, I will upload my road grant documents, my road tax, my insurance documents, everything's approved, and I want to share my car, say, next weekend. But next weekend, let's just say I'm in Cameron Highlands on a getaway, and I don't want to have to physically meet someone in order to share the car.
Yeah.
TREVO will send a custodian over to my place, take over the keys, and manage the car for us, clean everything before sending it to the user or the guest. And when the guest is done with it, they will pick up the keys in the car, wash the car, and then send it back to the host. So we offer these custodian services to address some of those irrational concerns, right? But I think the second part as well that I believe is a real value add on the platform is that we also understood user behaviors, where the irrationality kicks in based on a very micro level. And let me elaborate a bit further. So for example, what we're seeing is a lot of people who own a Continental car that's slightly more expensive, they don't feel exactly comfortable sharing their cars that much, right? So on our platform, we have a high percentage of Japanese cars, high percentage of locally manufactured vehicles. But in terms of Continental vehicles, we see the supply is still a bit shorter in terms of the overall supply. And why is that so? It's because a lot of Continental car owners that we speak to don't feel comfortable sharing their car.
Plus, they don't have the economic need to do so.
Some of them is true, but some of them there's still economic need, but it's just irrational, right? For example, I drive a Golf GTI. I don't trust someone to know how to handle it
Okay.
because it handles differently.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
example,
Yeah.
so what we realize is through that behavior, we create mini communities within the platform. So something that, for example, we're looking
Oh my
at
God,
is
the T20 club.
yeah. So for example, where someone else who drives a similar category car will be able to access your car.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just like it's a whole T20 M40 thing again. But I see what you're trying to get at, and I see where you're trying to match that demand and supply again. I wish you all the best. We have that's all the time we have for now. That was my conversation with Leon Foong, the CEO of SOCAR Malaysia. Do check out TREVO and also SOCAR. Try to understand what they're trying to offer as well. Plenty of interviews like this can also be found on our platform on AstroAwani.com. Look for Notepad over there. You can also watch these kind of interviews on your mobile devices. Download the Astro Awani app wherever you get the application. Till then, thanks very much for watching and goodbye.